Hey everyone, welcome back to Navajo Tea Time. It is November, and the topic for this month is...
The topic for this month, for this episode is heritage and identity politics. So, yay!
Yeah. And again, I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Adrian. Yat
I always forget to do an introduction.
I know. Yat Adrian Lerma Yanishia Na crazy na Nishla Nash Tabahan Bashichin Tachini Dashanella Gulfan Dashache. I was born and raised on the res, and I am a co-host of Navajo Tea Time.
You did this to me last time on the stage. So now I gotta do my clans. She Kelsey Lee Inishia Sitna Ginny Nishla Sedeshkijni Bashishchi German Dasha Che Kia Ani Dasha Nella.
I mean, imagine doing a whole episode on identity and not giving our
not
clans.
Identifying ourselves.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is so last year we took 23andMe tests, and this is going to be the year after our DNA test came back, what's changed, what hasn't, how we learned anything, and then basically our thoughts on DNA tests in general. So shall we jump into it?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, cool. So I pulled up a couple. We'll put a few links down below regarding where we're getting our information. But there are a couple articles that I was looking at that basically weigh the pros and cons of DNA testing, why it's good, why it's bad, and things to be aware of. So this article here is basically, so the articles that that are not coming up right now.
Maybe you can just paraphrase them and they can read them.
Yeah. So the first one is it's a commentary on DNA testing and the risks involved with taking those tests like from Ancestry.com or 23andMe, and how it can be a risk to your privacy, your personal privacy. The next article is basically 23 reasons not to reveal your data online. And the third one is from knowyourdna.com, the pros and cons of genetic testing. So there are various reasons why people would want to use these tests to kind of find a way back through their bloodline, through their history. And it does create a lot of, questions about who we are as individuals. But these articles, they just provide a little bit of context, kind of things to take into consideration before you willingly pay a company to give away your personal information.
Like, it's literally your DNA. It's not just personal information. It's like, this is your genetic code that you're giving to this company to have.
Yeah, and you don't really have a say as to how they're going to utilize that DNA or what they're going to use it for later. It basically becomes property of the company.
It depends on the company. Mm-hmm. And their terms of use and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when we're given these disclaimers, to read, and oftentimes we don't want to read all the fine print, so we just click accept.
I read and accept. Yeah.
Yeah, so take time to read through them before you just, accept it. That's all we wanted to say about that. But has anything changed for you?
Well, ever since I found out about the Neanderthal DNA, I think I've been joking a little bit more about how I'm not fully human. And like, especially during the summer after the monsoon, when the mosquitoes come in, and I'm like, darn my Neanderthal blood, because it said that because I have that Neanderthal DNA, mosquitoes might be more likely to drink from me instead of the other people around me. So it's, especially the Neanderthal DNA, it's just been really hilarious. Just like bring that up every once in a while.
Do you ever wonder what side of your family you got that from? Like from your mom or your dad?
A little bit, but I don't know. It depends. Yeah, kinda. You just got to have other people take the test in your family. Which I haven't, because it's an expensive test.
Yeah, it is. For me, I was at a this past week, Dinan College hosted this event called the reading series, and one of the readers was Sherwin Bitsui, and he's a very well-known poet, author. He has 2 books out that he read from. One is called Flood Songs, and one is called, what was it? He was all like, "This is my disintegration," like, referring to to The Cure. What was it called? I'm sorry. But he was there, and he was like, and he was like, "Hey," he's like, "I took a 23andMe test, and guess what? We're relatives." I'm all, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh my God." And so he's like, "My name isn't on there, but, I saw your name, and I was surprised to see that we're related." I was like, "Wow, that's cool." So I was like, "What are your clans?" And so we traded clans, and our clans do link up. He's actually my Nully. And so my Nullies are Techitney, and his are Techitney, so we have that connection. So that was cool.
I know, every once in a while I'll get an email from 23andMe, and they're like, "You have 7 more relatives." I'm like, "More?" More relatives? And I'm kind of afraid to look because I know my dad's side, my dad's dad, he didn't stay with my Nully, and he didn't raise my dad's family. He had his own family somewhere else often, so he was never a part of my dad's life ever. And so I'm like, looking at some of the names, I'm like, those are my dad's family, and I don't know if I want to know them. Not for any mean reason. It's just like they've never been a part of my life or my dad's life. So it'd be like kind of awkward to be like, "Hey, your grandpa slept with my grandma so many years," and it's
that would be awkward, huh?
And I would say it like bluntly like that. I wouldn't like ease in.
That's funny. Yeah, so nothing else has really changed for me, though, regarding that. I mean, it is nice to see who I'm, I guess, closely related to through 23andMe. I haven't signed up for any additional research or handed over any more samples or anything like that. So, yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was cool to learn. Oh, you know what I have noticed, actually? So when we first took the test, I had a higher percentage of the percentages for Native American, I think it's like Native American connections was pretty high. I think it was like 98%. And now it actually lowered a little bit. Yeah, so it's changing as more data is coming in from around the world, I guess, and the different connections, and they're kind of refining the information. So I noticed that it did kind of shift slightly.
I still wish they had a feature where like it says, "Oh, you may be like on one side it's like you have like a 3rd generation Native." I'm like, "No, I am Native." I wish there was a way to like correct the information.
Yeah.
Instead of like, "Oh, you may have this." Like, "No, I do have this," or "No, I don't." I wish there was that kind of survey on there. Yeah.
That would be helpful, especially if they gave you the option to, and that would be the thing that we would have to decide on. Do we want to hand over more information? But if we could refine the data in some way where we could give some context for the results that they got, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, because right now it says, "Oh, you may have a grandma who is of American Indian descent." I'm like, "No, I have a mom and a grandma and a dad, and I am of Native American descent."
Yes.
So it'd just be nice to change that up. And then when I was sharing the results with my family, my aunt who does like Ancestry and Me, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
Ancestry.com?
Yeah, I'm just like mixing the two together.
Ancestry and Me.
The 23andMe. So she did the Ancestry DNA testing, and then she also does like a lot of like the family keeping and everything. And she's like, "Oh, I don't trust 23andMe." I'm like, "Why?" It's like, "Because they sell your data." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Dang. I know. We did 23andMe, so yeah.
But well, I don't know. I'm not too bad about it. I don't care. I don't care. And like for me, I think answering some of the medical questions would be helpful because I know my grandfather had ALS, and he had like some really weird rapid one where he had it, he got diagnosed, and he like passed away almost within a year.
Wow.
Of being diagnosed. And it's like that's the fastest they've ever seen it take hold of a person. So having my DNA in that database might help me identify if I have it or if we can pass it down. Like, just having those types of illnesses in your family and having the DNA, some lab testing for things, it'd be helpful to know, like, how that could be prevented or treated or predicted.
Yeah.
In a way, because there's no real, I think still there's no way of predicting who gets ALS.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. And I mean, I think it's helpful. I feel like I should care more about that too, but honestly, I'm kind of on the same page. I'm like, I don't really care as much as I probably should, considering what I know. But
there's some things you care about, there's some things you don't, like.
Yeah, and there's some things you can control and there's things you can't. And I'm at that point where it's like, well, I already did this thing. Why I'm not gonna like stress out about it because I really can't change that decision that I already made. So anyways, but the one good thing that came from it, I think, is I've been able to kind of form more connections with people of, I guess, similar backgrounds, in the sense that, like, for example, my clan Nakaidina has connections to Spanish ancestry, right? Well, there's a professor I had this semester during the first 8 weeks, and she's of Spanish descent too, and she's very proud of it. And she did a lot of research, kind of tracking her heritage back, her ancestry back, and that was something she posed to the class at the beginning of the semester. She was sharing her history, and she was asking us about ours, and so I shared with her a little bit about me, and that we kind of formed that connection, and it kind of built a rapport for us in the class, which I thought was nice and meaningful, because when you're taking a class with, it was an online class too, so like there's hundreds of students, right, taking this class, so to be kind of on a first-hand basis or have some sort of connection to your professor is always helpful, I think, just because you're seen, you're recognizable in a pool of many people, and so that was, yeah, thank you. Thank you, 23andMe.
Not sponsored.
I know. Thank you, Nakaidina family, for telling me the story of our ancestry.
Yeah, I think like we said in the last one, it's just, for me, it's just interesting to like be able to track different family members all the way back to whenever. And there was one point where we found a distant family member's last name was like Von Ravenstein. I'm like, how come we couldn't keep that really cool name?
I know, right?
It's like Von Ravenstein.
That's cool.
That's a really cool name. I wish we could have kept.
That's funny. So the next part of the conversation related to this topic is the topic of peoplehood, and I think it's something we touched up upon in a last episode also, but I wanted to share a little more information about that because it is related to heritage, ancestry, and peoplehood. So so there's a paper. It's behind a paywall. But if you want to read this, you can. It's a paper done by Tom Holm, J. Diane Peterson, and Ben Chavez.
Peterson or Pearson?
Oh, Pearson, sorry. It's Peoplehood, a model for the extension of sovereignty in American Indian studies. So Tom Holm is a professor at the University of Arizona, as well as other contributors to the paper and to the research, but he talks about this peoplehood model, and it's comprised of language, sacred history, what does that say? Oh yeah, place, territory, and a ceremonial cycle. So what the argument is that these four elements contribute to the formation of a people and a designation of peoplehood. So for example, with Diné people, we have our own language, right? We have Dinepazad, and then our sacred history is basically like Diné Bahanet, right? Our creation story. And then we have a ceremonial cycle, which follows, throughout this. It's linked to the seasons. It's linked to transitions, within the cosmos. And so that ceremonial cycle is something that's been consistent throughout our history. And then, of course, place, territory, meaning our homeland. So all of those things, we're kind of checking off the boxes. So by this definition, we are a people. So the examples and expanded terminology by the peoplehood model. So under language, it's stated indigenous language, parents, grandparents, guardians, caregivers, elders, and ancestors' language. The preservation of that language and the revitalization of it as well. Under territory, they talk about places within the homeland, traditional place, range, safe space, family space, personal places, like personal spaces, right? So this could be our connection to where our clan or our, like the band within our tribe lived, you know, for many, many years, our connection to that space, to that place, and then to different places within the homeland. For example, we have 6 sacred mountains, right? And how do those places contribute to our history and our strength as individuals? And then there's sacred history, and this is basically, you know, history, experience, generational knowledge, and ancestral knowledge. So all of these comprised they form this sacred history that we have, this understanding that we have, and oftentimes that's within song, that's within prayers, that's in the stories we tell, that oral history, it's all in that. And then under ceremonial cycles, the elements of that are like the traditional calendar, cultural calendars, cultural events, celebrations, festivals, holidays, that sort of thing. So we'll include that link down below. So if you're interested and you want to check that out, it's there for you. And we're linking you directly to the source because, you know, neither of us have done that research individually. And we want to speak about it, but not so much speak as experts in the field of peoplehood.
One thing I wanted to do, like why I put the topic in here, is like, what's your opinion about it? Like about this class or like this paper, this defining what a peoplehood is. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it helpful?
I think it's helpful, if anything. And I have a close relationship to it because my Dr. Tom Holm was one of my professors at UA, and then my husband, he has done research on the peoplehood model as well, and he's kind of expanded on it with his work. So these are conversations that we have on a regular basis when we're traveling or, you know, just hanging out together. We talk about this thing, and we talk about this peoplehood model and how it applies to us and how we utilize it to teach and have these conversations. Because what I know is that oftentimes we have a sense, an understanding of what is around us, but we don't oftentimes have the vocabulary, the terminology. We don't have the formed thoughts that are based on research to kind of back up what we sense, what we think, what we suspect, and what we know. And oftentimes when we're talking, it just comes off like, oh, that's an interesting thought, or that's an interesting opinion. And it can be written off sometimes, you know, especially like if it's in a classroom or a boardroom, or you're talking with experts in a field related, and you're trying to legitimize your knowledge and who you are as a person and why your cultural background or why your heritage or ancestry or all these connections matter. And sometimes there's this, not even sometimes, there's a systematic, I think, there's a systematic force that's in place that's trying to eliminate these things and kind of pull us away from it, I think. And so when we have this knowledge backed up by research, it's helpful. And when we have these formed thoughts already that we can tie back to our own opinions, or that we can link back to these, I guess, internal thoughts that we have, the sense of knowing, we can back it up by research, it's helpful in that way. And so I included a link in our document, the links to an interview my husband did with Beyond the Mesas, and it talks about the peoplehood model, and it's a conversation about research with a professor there at the University of Arizona as well. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about it? Do you think it's helpful? Do you think it's, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I was really interested in it and figuring out like what it was more of, but I don't know.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, when you look at the model, it's very simplistic, right? And it's basically these 4 spheres with, language, sacred history, place, territory, and ceremonial cycle all in one, and then what their interactions are to one another. So when you look at it visually, it's very simple. But when you start to talk about it, you can go in depth. And when you start to form the connections between all and how not only they feed one another, but how they work together in unison, it really does give you a sense of not just your own sense of peoplehood and the people you belong to, but others as well. And what I've seen, there was a conversation that I was privy to at the university, at UC Davis in California. There's a professor out there who brought my husband out to do a talk. And he was talking about the peoplehood model that's included in his book, Indigenous Sovereignty in the 21st Century. And the students there were fascinated by it because it linked into what they were talking about with their professor that semester. But when they were looking at the model and talking about the different connections, and he was challenging them to apply this to their own history, they were seeing kind of the holes in the knowledge they have here in America, which was fascinating to me because a lot of people don't carry around this sense, or they don't carry it. They're not thinking about it. It's not the forefront of their minds, thinking like, oh, I am an immigrant to this country. They're not thinking about their homeland or what their sacred history might be or what their languages were before colonization, before leaving their homeland to come here to America. They don't have a connection to the place or territory. And so it was really interesting to challenge them to think back and then to ask them to, take the time to go home and connect with their family, their elders, and find that connection. What would that be like if they were to make that journey home? You know what I mean? And how would that build or strengthen their foundation as a person and build their identity so that they're a whole person, right? And it was really interesting because you could see them putting the pieces together and you could see them forming their own conclusions about it. And I think a lot of people left the classroom, left the talk, feeling almost empowered to do that. You know what I mean? And it was cool because afterward they were coming up to my husband and asking him, additional questions about it, thanking him for just starting that conversation and putting him on that like thought path. And I think that's meaningful for a lot of us because we're so often just looking at the present day, what's happening right now in front of us. And we're not taking the time to really look back and think about who we are as individuals, as people, and how we're all connected as well, and how these things kind of form this really cool ecosystem, you know what I mean? So, as humans, So anyways, I think it's cool. Yeah, I think it's cool. So I wanted to share that information with our viewers just so they can, if they have questions about it, and, it is, not only is it, November is American Indian Heritage Month, but it's also an opportunity for us to kind of start thinking about that. You know what I mean? Because I think that's what we do. When we come together with our families, we start having these conversations right around the table. And sometimes this is our only time to maybe go visit our grandparents or be around our family very closely for a number of days. And so this is a great opportunity to have those conversations, ask those questions. And if you are so inclined to look at Native authors, there's 2 right here that you can look into that I think have done some really great work. So, yeah. Do you want to say anything else related to that? Do you want to go to the next topic?
We can go to the next topic.
Okay.
Oh, the next topic. Me. Keeping traditions alive. Like, thoughts of modernization of different things. So, me being someone not raised traditionally, being raised by parents who weren't really ever fully committed to any type of like religion or belief system. Like my mom went to a couple of different ones. My dad never really solidified on one, but like just like modernizing different types of traditions, like people posting dances on social media, especially during the pandemic, and like, I don't know, like just updating some things a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on those?
Like thoughts on modernization as Native people? Or,
yeah, kind of.
Or as American people? Well, I mean, so I did write down a few notes on what my thoughts on modernization are, and I feel like, or I know this, modernization in society is the transformation from a traditional, rural, agrarian society to a secular, urban, industrial society. So modernization started with the Industrial Revolution in many ways, right? It also started with the separation between church and state. And also with us moving away from kind of farm life where we're living these, we have homesteads, I guess, homestead lives where we're creating our own food, we're contributing to our economy with livestock or with materials that we're sourcing from our like immediate environment. Mm-hmm. We're kind of we moved away from that, not just as Navajo people or Hopi people or Native people, but all of us. I feel like, you know, all across America or all over the world, we're kind of, that's what modernization looks like. So, you know, as Dene, we are very adaptive. We're an adaptive people, and I think that our ability to do that has contributed to our survival. If we were not as adaptive, I think that maybe we would have struggled, you know, so we would be fighting it, you know, and it would make our lives more difficult. But I think we've always been very adaptive. We're really quick to learn new skills, ingrain new ways of living that make our lives easier or happier. You know what I mean? I think we're always willing to do that, and I see us do that all the time today. I don't think that we should feel any shame because of modernization, because I think it's very toxic for our spirits. And I think that we should be aware, though, of how modernization is impacting our connection to our roots. So that's where I fall on all of this, because I think sometimes if you're moving so fast forward and your main, every day you're thinking or you're saying and believing that, you know what, I just need to move forward and leave the past in the past and not worry about what was, but, you know, focus on what is to be. That can be detrimental in many ways, and that's only because I've said this before. I think that to be a whole person, it's good to know where you came from so that you can move forward better informed with a strategy in place, you know, so that you're...
Well, now that you defined it in, like, the social context, I guess, for me, it's not that. It's like when you see a sheep herder on a 4x4 instead of walking, or, like, using the electrical shears instead of the hand shears, or even, like, with chapter meetings now, there's a lot of like pushback on having virtual meetings or having hybrid meetings.
Or even like ceremonies over Zoom.
Yeah, because some people, they don't, especially like the elders, they don't understand it, so they get mad at it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to try and tell, like, well, we got to adapt and learn. Like, this isn't how it's done. We can't do it this way because we've never done it this way before.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the feedback. And I know it's just like a lot of frustration of not understanding how the technology works, but then sometimes like you gotta kind of move forward and try and teach them the best they can, but sometimes those elders are just stubborn.
I feel like we always have to move forward and we always have to be adaptable. Yeah, I think we should always be adaptable, and I think that we should always be learning new skills, and we should be helping our elders do that. You know what I mean? We should be patient with them, we should be empathetic and kind. And in that way, they're able to enjoy these like new technologies or new ways of making their lives easier. You know, for example, and I'm a big proponent of that, and it's proven in my work because, you know, since 2011, I've been teaching and educating elders on how to utilize solar technology in their homes, so that they're moving away from burning kerosene lanterns in their homes, which contributes to indoor air pollution, which gives them respiratory illnesses. So by providing this alternate form of energy for them that's easy to use, what we call res-tested, grandma-approved technology, it's a great way to kind of give them a better quality of life while being patient and kind enough to teach them. And then same thing with Zoom. You know, when we went to online learning at the college, my husband and I made it, we made it our mission to teach as many elders who were not familiar with Zoom or online teaching and learning and how to use that technology so that they could do their jobs, and so that students could continue to learn, so that that wasn't something that was going to be detrimental to what we're trying to accomplish as an institution, right? So, and it took a lot of time and patience. It took time to and a lot of this means you have to oftentimes translate things from English to Navajo, and you have to provide instruction that's easy to understand, and you have to walk them through it and have the patience to do that. But what it does is it gives them agency, and that's so important. So I think if we could, you know, we have to move forward, otherwise we get left behind. That's just the matter. That's just the state of things. And I don't want us to ever be left behind because we're digging our heels in so deeply that we're putting ourselves back in a way, or, you know, I think it could be really harmful, especially like in a work environment or like government, like tribal government.
That was one of the things like my mom said she heard about like some of the older teachers. They didn't want to learn Zoom. They didn't want to do online teaching because they weren't used to it, and like they used the excuse that like, they're too old to learn.
Yeah, that's not true. Old people are smart. They're freaking smart. They know more than us. They're stubborn, but they're smart. And I always tell them that. I'm like, you're smart enough to do this. If you know, like, and what I told them is like, this isn't to make your life harder. It's to protect you because we're in a pandemic, you know?
Yeah.
If you get exposed to the virus because you're so adamant about teaching online that you could potentially expose yourself to this, not only are you a part of a vulnerable population of people, but if you get sick and God forbid you lose your life, you're going to take with you all the knowledge you have. And we're not ready to let that happen. So learn this, you know? And that's how I talk to them. I'm like, please do it for us. Like, we value you. We care about you. We love you. Please, like, just let us teach you. And that resonated. But I kind of had to say that too. Like, come on. Like, this is life or death. Quit messing around.
Did they have my attitude? Like, what are you going to do? Die? It's like, yeah, I guess I'll die then.
I think people get frustrated and they do get stubborn and they're just like, no, you know, this is inconvenient. And I think when you come to them with love, you know, they're like, okay, you know, all right, teach me. And that's kind of the attitude I got. Like,
that's
fine,
how I wasn't
you know.
I wasn't raised that way. It was like, I guess we'll die.
I guess we're all just gonna lose this knowledge. Thanks.
So we got a comment on our home site lease video that was asking for an update on our home site lease application and process. So in August or early October, I can't really remember because of my introverted needing to sleep for about a week after the Western Navajo Fair. Yeah, so the update for me and my home site lease application is I'm still waiting for, okay, so I misnamed it, I guess. I said EPA survey, but it's actually the Fish and Wildlife survey. And so I'm still waiting on that. I've called them. I probably need to recall them again and just see where I am on their list. But yeah, I'm just waiting for them to do their check, the Fish and Wildlife, to do their check and see if there's any endangered animals, or my building a house in that area will negatively impact any fish or wildlife. And it was interesting because the lady I was talking to said, oh yeah, they just need to check your area and then see if they need to go out and do a physical visit. So they're not even doing a physical visit. It's literally just checking on the computer, and then the computer says, hey, yeah, you need to go out there and look at it.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, since the pandemic, it's been a little backed up. I'm like, I've had my application in since 2017. And they're like, well, it was like, it says on this 20 whatever. I'm like, yeah, because I had to resubmit it because you guys didn't do it the first time.
The last time I checked, in on Fish and Wildlife, which was this past summer, I think they only had 2 people available.
When I
in that
called,
office.
they had one person doing the checks, and they had another office lady answering. So
that's what it was, yeah. And I'm just like, for the whole Navajo Nation? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So.
And it was like, ugh. I'm like, it's like... So I guess if you're from Western and if you're from Cameron and you still need your Fish and Wildlife, just call them up and just keep calling them. If you call the home office or the home site lease office in Tuba for Western, they will give you the number to Fish and Wildlife now. Before they weren't giving out that number, but now they are giving out that number, so you can call them.
Yeah, I have it right here. I'll put it down below.
I'm not going to blast or dox anyone.
Just kidding.
But you can request the number from them. And yeah, so that's the update is I'm still waiting for Fish and Wildlife, and now I have the direct line to them. So I can call them and bug them.
Well, I guess that's a pretty good update. It's slowly moving forward, I guess. Mine is still at a standstill. Like, we haven't located a new place to get a home site lease, and I am currently trying to get a hold of a grazing official to see what areas are available where I'm currently at, but I haven't been able to connect just because Monday through Friday when they're supposedly available, I haven't been able to connect with them. For a long time too, the chapter was shut down completely to the public. They would lock the gate, so you can't even get into the building. And then I would call and I wouldn't receive any calls back or even connect with anybody. So I did see that they opened up again, but I haven't been able to get away from work. So it's crazy because I feel like I have to like take leave just to try to get a meeting to find out what's available. So I guess I'm starting to feel a little discouraged. And yeah, but I'm hoping that maybe this year, if I really commit to it and, that we're going to make some strides forward, because I really, really want to get that taken care of. And I know I should have done it earlier, like when I was 18.
I mean, but like when you're 18, you're like, where do I want to live? I don't know, not on the res. So
I moved away, yeah.
And then like there's so much legal information and so much money up front that like you expect an 18-year-old to pay for an ARC survey and a like GPS survey.
Yeah, and I didn't have anyone there to help me with it. Like my parents didn't put any energy into it. They were living in California at the time. So I didn't have anyone to be like, hey, let's go take care of this.
Yeah, and it's such a long process. I think they've updated the process now. Maybe later on we can go over the new process.
Yeah, let's do that. Maybe in a future video.
Yeah, so we'll do that in a future video. I just wanted to give the update because it was asked about.
Okay, so the last element that we're going to talk about that's related to this overarching topic is Kelsey.
So there's this podcast that I kind of heard from a friend from high school mentioned it, said she helped on it a couple of times, so I was listening to it, and it's the Hopi podcast by, it's called Carl and J-Man Save the World, and so my husband's family is Hopi, and so my little one's part Hopi. I just kind of wanted to like learn a little bit more about their heritage and their traditions and some of their things, because my husband doesn't really know. He wasn't really taught much of it growing up, and so like I kind of want to be able to support Frankie, my little one, if she wants to go that way, if she wants to learn more about that. I'll have a little bit of knowledge to help her. Obviously, her aunt would have to be a major person to help with that, but like I don't want to be like, I have no idea about any of this. Like, I know a little bit. I can help a little bit. So that's why I've been listening to their podcast. Cause
your Uncle Carl and J-Man told me this.
No, not at all. But like, because obviously things that happen on Hopi's side and everything, they affect my husband and they'll affect my little one. So they also talk about like different political, stuff going on.
Oh, cool.
So it's just nice. Even if he won't listen to it, I'm just like, okay, like, did you know this about your tribe? He's like, what? I'm like, oh,
okay. You're all nav-splaining, eh? Just kidding.
I was like, I heard them say this. Is that true for you? Is how I always am like.
That's cool.
Was it so like when I hear something and I ask him about it, I'm like, is this what you were taught? Is this what you know of it? He's like, I was told very little. I was taught very little. I was like, oh, well, this is how I heard it. how do you like because obviously different people practice things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so like how do you guys practice? Because like now that we're in winter, there's a certain time in winter where like you're not supposed to be really loud at night, you're not supposed to cut your hair, you're not supposed to shower, you're not supposed to cut your nails.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Because it's like, I think it's like the dead moon, I don't know what it's called specifically, but it's like the spirits are more active during this nighttime.
Oh, yeah.
So they're out more at night, and it's just their time. So you got to be quiet and respectful of them being out and about at night. Yeah, so I asked him about it a bit more. He's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what this is. But like being able to talk to him about this stuff with his culture and trying to teach Frankie it is helpful with listening to the podcast. But they talked about this term called like a devout Hopi, and it's like someone who like, I guess they say, I don't remember the term, but like they're doing Hopi things 24/7 every day, 365, you know, not just when it's convenient, not just when a ceremony's around, not when you're trying to get good favor with someone. So like that's what they talk about, like the difference between devout Hopi and just sometimes Hopi.
Got it. Yeah.
And so I was like, ask Adrian, I was like, what do you consider like a devout Navajo or Diné person?
I know, I was like, you're asking me?
with modern, because I know she likes to throw around the term modern tradish.
I do. I have a lot of hashtags that are like modern tradish.
Because for me, I think everything I've ever experienced about traditional is modern tradish.
Yeah.
And like where it's kind of traditional, but it's been modernized. But like, what would a complete traditional person be in society today?
Today, in 2022. Okay,
Yeah.
so do you want me to state what I wrote? Okay. So I wrote this down. I wrote, a devout Diné person would walk the corn pollen path, meaning that they would adhere to Diné fundamental law, practice traditional ways of living and believing. They would speak Dinepazad, and they would only practice Diné spirituality and ceremony, not Native American church or any kind of church like Christianity. There wouldn't be any mixing with other races, and meaning like having children with other races, and respecting kinship, clans, eating natural foods, usually foods that are locally sourced and grown by that individual or others around that area, and then following the seasons and relying on the land to survive. So to me, that's a definition of a devout Diné person, a devout Diné, and that's a pretty high bar. I think that would be very difficult. I mean, just if you just look at food, you know what I mean? Like our ability to grow our own food. And I know a lot of Hopi do that, but it's a whole communal thing. And the way Hopi and Pueblo people function, it's a lot different than how Diné people function. And the way our families are now, where we're all kind of spread out, oftentimes half the family lives in urban spaces. And if you live back on the res, there's a lot of challenges that come with that. If you're trying to only grow your own food or only eat natural foods, I think that would be a huge challenge.
I had a question about like when you said not mixing with other races. What about adopted clans?
Ooh, that's a hot topic. Okay, so this is not my rule. And this is also not
Adrian's rule for them. I'm just kidding.
It's not, and I don't, and you just have to look at my family and my children to see that. But so this is the teaching, is they say that Diné people, when the people were formed, there were 4 original clans, right? And those clans were given specific instructions about how to live and how to stay protected, so they're not vulnerable to certain ailments or vulnerable to certain kinds of health problems, things like that. And that is related specifically to not partnering up and having children with your enemies. So this could be like Bilagana, right? Like having children with them, or having children with people from different parts of the world, because what they say is it'll create conflict within the child that's born as a result, not just with identity, but also spiritually, the mixing of the bloodlines also brings in different kinds of, and we know this through genetics, that the child will inherit things from that side of their family, and that will show up in their physical makeup. It could show up with disabilities, it could show up with illnesses or susceptibility to illnesses, it could show up with a psychological turmoil, emotional imbalance. And so that's what they say. That's why they say don't do that. Like they would always say, like, do da, you don't do that. You only, it was only acceptable to partner up with other indigenous people, basically. So that was a norm. Over time, the 4 clans started to partner with people from other tribes, and that's how our adopted clans were created. So, for example, my clans, I have 3 adopted clans. One of them, it comes from Zuni, one comes from Mescalero Apache, and one comes from Spanish, which is my first clan. And so that, I kind of like, I believe it because there is genetic memory. Mm-hmm. And like when I was younger, when I was a little girl, I used to dream about Spain. So weird. I could understand Spanish too when I was young, and I didn't know why, because no one in my family spoke Spanish to me. I didn't know why I had this fascination with, certain kinds of music and art. And so it was really, and that was when I was very young. And I think when you're young, you're still very connected. Mm-hmm. And then as you get older, you change and you become more like in the present. But that's just my own assumption, but so that's what I was told. That's what people have said. That's what Hatathli say too. So when you have a child with somebody who is not indigenous, you really have to care for that child, and you really have to address some of those things early. And you can do that with ceremony. You can do that with their everyday teachings. Just informing them of who they are and accepting them for who they are. And the practicality of it is just the mixing of genetic makeup and what the consequences are for that. And then, of course, having a child with someone who is your enemy is also very dangerous, and we have enemy way ceremonies that can address those things. Back in the day, the enemy way ceremony was mostly meant for people who had gone to war, but now sometimes that has to be utilized for people who marry with our enemies and have children.
Why
with
do
them.
you keep looking at me like
I'm just looking at you because I'm trying to connect with you. I'm not judging anybody. Like I said, my first clan is Nakaidana, meaning that the story goes a Spanish woman partnered with a Dene man and they had children, and mm-hmm. that's how our clan formed. So I have that with me as well. And I believe that there are some really beautiful things about that culture and that way of being that do contribute to who I am as a person, and I'm grateful for it, thankful for it, and I'm curious about it. But I always try to look at the positives, what elements from other cultures contribute to my whole being mm-hmm. and make me who I am as a person. I don't always look at the detriment of it, but this is what that is coming from. And it's not me saying that. This is just what other Dene people have said, and that's what I've heard from Hatathli. And no one wants to talk about it or hear it either because right now there's so much mixing that's happened, mm-hmm. and that's just the reality of the situation. Other people have said, and I think it's probably true, that there aren't any more full-blooded Navajo people who only have the 4 original clans. There might be, and if you are, you're probably like super Dene, but the majority of us have, we have that background where we have adopted clans, we have a history of coming from different races, and that's the norm nowadays. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us are partnering with people of different races too. So, and we see that it's very strongly represented in our leadership. It's very in the media, you know what I mean? Like, it's everywhere. It's just the norm now. And I'm not in any way judging anybody, and I'm not saying that you can't be a devout Dene person without checking that box off. But when you asked me, yeah, what would that look like? That's how it looks like to me, at least. What about you?
Me, I had no idea. Like I said, like no no concept of what some devout person would like. For me, the most like traditional native Navajo person I know was my great grandma. But still, she drove around, and then she left the Four Sacred Mountains constantly to sell jewelry. She never taught her kids any of the traditional ways or anything, but she did also used to go to church when she was younger. She used to drink, you know.
Oh yeah, that's another thing too. A devout person wouldn't engage in any kind of substance misuse at all. Like no alcohol, no drugs.
Yeah, but she was like the most traditional person I knew, and so
yeah. And that idea too that you can't leave the Four Sacred Mountains, that's not true, because that was the norm. There are trade routes that were established, you know, way before first contact with outsiders.
Oh, I didn't know. That was just like what they said in like Navajo class in like
no, like
3rd to 8th grade. Like, oh, you don't leave the Navajo the Sacred Mountains. You stay here.
There's people too, like, so there's places like where I live now on the res, and there's all this history attached to how like people from different tribes used to come there. They used to come there for ceremony. They used to come there for trade. And it's really cool. Like, there's a super rich history within this space. And so if you know it, then you realize that, you know, there weren't these set borders. Like, our idea of borders today are very different from what they look like in the past, right? Now we have literal, like, fences and walls and border patrol, and you need a passport. It wasn't like that in the past, you know. People moved around a lot. That was the norm. Even Navajo, we never were just in one place. We had our summer camp, our winter camp. We moved, and that's how we were able to keep the land healthy, by being able to move our livestock. You know what I mean? And not overgraze.
Like, those are some of the stories my grandma would say. Was like when we're driving to Tuba to her appointment, she's like, "Oh, we used to travel down from Gray Mountain, past Shadow Mountain, through the canyon, and up towards Tuba City, and that's where my grandfather's land was, and that's where we had the sheep, and then sometimes we'd walk all the way back to Cameron and everything." She's like, we'd always like migrate between the two. Yeah,
on my dad's side, my dad's Nellie, she had her winter camp kind of closer to Shadow Mountain, and then she would move it to the North Rim. So she had two, and then like on my Che, he used to move their flock from Kaibito all the way to Navajo Mountain. He would go like through the canyons toward the you could see it too, and that was just the norm, you know. And so they would, my great Nellie, she had 5 camps, and so she would, because she had so many livestock, so she had 5 of them, and so they would move them around like that. So that was our norm. And I know they say like now, I think some people, they hear one thing and then they stick with that one thing for their whole life without ever questioning it. And that becomes their reality. And I think that's how certain taboos are born. And I think that's really detrimental to us, because they're not actually fact-checking or getting information from other people or trying to build out the context of their understanding. They're just kind of like, well, this is what I heard, and that's what the elders said. And it's like, yeah, but maybe they were misinformed or wrong, or are you
maybe
sure?
they were wrong? That's not something you say about elders, is maybe they were wrong.
There's a difference between an elder and an old person. That's all I'm saying, is like, some people are just old. To be an elder is different. That's someone who carries wisdom with them. That's someone who carries knowledge. That's someone who, you know, lives on, like, someone who's on that, who basically walks that corn pollen path. And so, you know, there's a lot of old people, but there's not a lot of elders. That's what I mean. You know what I mean? So I'm not just saying, like, maybe your elders are wrong.
Be the title of it. There's a lot of old people, but there's not a lot of elders.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not. I'm just saying, but like, you know, like, I feel like people just be like blanket elders. Like, you can't tell an older person they're wrong or correct them. There's like that weird, like, it's just been.
I mean, I think you should definitely, like, if an old person needs the door open for them, open it for them.
Not that way.
Feed them first, you know, listen to them when they're talking, be respectful. Naturally, that's just the way to be. But are you gonna listen to everything an older person says to you and take it as fact? Because I know some older people that are like really perverted. They're really bad with their family. They don't take care of their kids or their grandkids.
That was
they're
like what I was saying last year. You know, like
yeah,
when I was
they're
I'm
abusive.
so sad that this elder was left alone. His family doesn't visit him. It's like, why? Why doesn't his family visit him?
That
you
was
know?
the hot tea last time. Yeah,
Yeah,
and this is the hot tea this time. Is like, and yeah, I feel like we're gonna upset some people. So I'm sorry if you're offended, but yeah.
Like, just because you're old doesn't mean you're right.
I think it doesn't mean you're considered an elder. An elder status is something that we aspire to, and it takes a lifetime to kind of reach that level. One day, I hope to be an elder. I do aspire to live a long life. I can't wait to get gray hair, white hair, you know what I mean? To teach and, like, just be at peace and,
Is that why you bleach it? I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, I got my hair done. It's pretty, huh? No, but like real white hair. Yeah, so I haven't gotten any yet. So I guess that says a lot about my wisdom. None. I know. But my Nellia's son, she had black hair into her 90s. So.
Strong genes.
I know. It lives in me, eh? I know a lot of people that are my age that have white hair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think white hair represents wisdom or age, because
it's like stress.
No, like my husband's brother, whatever. He was like salt and pepper when I knew him in junior high. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
knew a guy like that. Yeah, at UA, he was Tongan, and he was salt and pepper too. And he was super young. He was probably like 20.
It's just your hair follicles.
Yeah, but
nothing to do with wisdom.
Yeah. So, anyways. One day, we'll see. We never know what's around the corner.
You'll aspire to be an elder. I aspire to be like the creepy old witch everyone's afraid to visit or walk past.
To have a haunted house, eh? Yeah.
And I'll just be cooking up sugary sweets and like, here, have a cookie.
I'm like, don't go to her house. Just kidding, kids, stay away. Leave a trail of breadcrumbs if you're gonna go visit Kelsey.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's my definition. I know it's probably like really.
Well, like that sets up some things of like people who like attack other people for not being as traditional, and then it's sort of like that thing of like when Christians, like really mean Christians, are like, oh, well, you need to follow the Bible and this and this and this, and like, oh, well, you're wearing mixed fabrics. Oh, you're eating pork.
Oh my God.
Oh, you had sex before marriage. It's like there's all these like if you want to stick to the Bible, then stick to the Bible. And I feel like sometimes with that, it's the same thing with like some traditional Navajos who want to like bash other people. It's like, well, you're not doing everything either.
Yeah, I get bashed all the time, honestly. Like my hair, like traditional Navajo women aren't supposed to bleach their hair or curl it.
Do they have access to bleach? Do they have access to a curler?
That's what people say, though. That's what people have said to my face. People have also said, well, you're not really Navajo because you don't have any original clans. They're all adopted. People have said, well, you're not really Diné because you're not a fluent speaker and you don't speak it every day. Why are you on YouTube speaking English? Who do you think you are? People have said, if you're traditional, why do you wear makeup? Or if you're a confident female, why do you wear makeup? And I'm just like...
Because it's pretty.
First of all. Yeah, so, there's always going to be that criticism. And I think... that's fine. I think everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and I'm not out here saying I'm like super Diné and I'm a devout Diné woman. No, I claim my identity as Diné-stan. I claim my identity as a mother. I claim my identity as a wife, but also, I'm also an agitator. That's what I'm doing here. I'm like agitating y'all, eh? I'm a nonconformist, you know what I mean? I consider myself to be an indigenous environmental feminist. I'm educated, I'm a business owner, and these are parts of my identity that form my perspective. But if someone were to, apply these things and say, are you a devout Diné woman or Diné person? I would say I do my best to walk the corn pollen path. I do adhere to Diné fundamental law. That's how I judge my behavior and my decision making. I do practice traditional ways of living and believing, meaning I do partake in ceremony. I do speak Dinepazad as much as I can, but no, I'm not fluent. But I do utilize the vocabulary every day, and I am teaching, and I've taken classes, and I will continue to learn. I do only practice Dine spirituality and ceremony. I do not go to NAC meetings. I don't go to church unless my mom tells me to. And that's just respect. I'm not like gonna go get on my knees and, give my soul away. But, out of respect, I will go if my mom says, go to church, like, okay, I'll go with her, just to be kind. Mixing with other races, my husband and my ex, they're native, they're indigenous, so I haven't done that. I don't have any children that are...
So when you say other races, you mean not native or not indigenous?
I mean...
Because technically everyone's indigenous to somewhere.
I guess to North America, or, to the Americas. So this is all our homeland, right? We're all indigenous to this place. So, we're from different tribes. But, like, even my ex, he is Tobajna Aja and Kia'ani. And Tobajna Aja comes from Taos Pueblo, I believe. So even he has adopted clans, even though he has an original clan. So, it's...
An original clan.
And one of the
a little
original...
there.
It's not me. It's all the Dine. They know. They know. Everybody knows the value of a Kia'ani man. Everyone knows the value of having one of the 4 original clans. I
don't think I've ever gotten special treatment for having, like, Kia'ani as my nullies.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not to your face, but I think people who understand the story of how the people were formed, how we were formed from the creation story, there is a lot of value there. I respect you. I respect other people who have those clans, but I think that I'm not also trying to devalue others or myself, you know what I mean? But, I think, like, I did make that conscious choice because that's what I was told by elders, that, there are consequences for doing that. So I never sought out to marry or be with, like, a Bilagana or anyone else from a different race that's not indigenous to this place. I didn't want to do that to myself. You know what I mean? Because there is a little bit of fear there. And I did make a conscious choice. I was very careful about who I chose to marry, who I chose to have children with. I never frivolously just was like, I'm going to do it with anybody and everybody. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to meet any qualifications with me. No. I was very calculated.
That's another topic, Adrian.
That's a hot tea topic for another day. But yeah, no, I was very deliberate.
Day.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone who's watched enough of our videos probably knows that. She's very deliberate, And I do try to be like that, and I did make those choices when I became of age, to be able to marry and have children. And so we all have that ability, and everyone's free to choose however they want to live their life and form their families. But that was just my choice. And then respecting kinship clans, yes, I do. I do believe that that's very important. I think it does provide a lot of strength to the children. And I didn't want to I didn't want to make that kind of choice where I would end up having my children bear the burden of my decisions, And so I was very conscious about that too. Eating natural foods, I do try. I do try to eat very clean foods, healthy foods as much as possible. However, I don't think this is very natural. So this is called a Malibu. You can get it at Hogan Espresso in Tuba City. This is not a natural food.
I mean, like, things like that in nature.
It looks toxic, right?
Like the toxic tree frogs, they're that color. It's like, you're not supposed to drink things that color.
So I do my best, right? I'm not perfect. Following the seasons, yes, I do follow the seasons. I do follow the ceremonial cycle within the seasons. Relying on the land to survive, that does not, for me at least, I don't grow my own food, but I do rely on the land for sourcing materials that I need to stay warm, to be clothed. I do seek out the help of farmers and like herbalists and stuff. So I do believe, like that was what I believe got us, at least me and my family, through the pandemic, because we utilized medicine from around the area to keep ourselves healthy and to survive. And yeah, so and we also use a lot of medicinal herbs for tobacco and for ceremony and all that stuff. So in some ways I have, you know what I mean, I do meet the criteria, but it's an everyday conscious decision, and every day we have the opportunity to choose something else. For example, exhibit B, just kidding. You know what I mean? Like, so we make choices every day about how we're going to live, what we're going to eat, how we're going to form connections. And the truth is, we're living a human experience in 2022. And I think that whatever choices we make, whether they're good, bad, we learn from them, right? And we get a unique lived experience. And for some people, that is really beautiful, So I'm not trying to like shame anybody. Mm-hmm. It's just like, some of us choose to try to live this way and others don't, and that's fine. So I don't know, I guess.
I just remember one thing, like I was having this conversation with someone a couple of years ago, mm-hmm. and they were talking about like being something like this, like a devout mm-hmm. Native person. It's like, mm-hmm. and to do that you have to forsake any other like ancestry that isn't mm-hmm. Navajo. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing that because I'm proud of my grandfather and mm-hmm. his family. Mm-hmm. They're a rowdy, ridiculous bunch, and I love them so mm-hmm. much. So much of their personality and their mm-hmm. fire is in me, and I would mm-hmm. refuse to not ever acknowledge them.
Yeah, like my aunt, she married a Biligana man, mm-hmm. and he, by blood, we're not related, but he was an educator, and he taught me so much from a very young age. My life with them was really great. They took me on travel. I was able to travel from a very young age. I was able to fly, to go on boats and ships, and like have all these really cool experiences, go to the beach, go to villas, you know what I mean? Like be around very wealthy families. And I got to see, and this is what I love about it, is not just so much the access and the privilege that came with having a relative who's Biligana, but I was able to see how he moved through the world. And the way a Biligana man moves through the world is so different from how like everyone else does. And I was able to see how he interacted with people and how he demanded respect but also gave it. How he just, his conversations and I didn't see anyone else, he was very loud too and vocal, mm-hmm. but he also had a very strong commitment to God. He's very spiritual. He's a hardcore devout Christian. I would see him read his Bible every day. He would pray every day. He treated my aunt really good, and he treated me really good. He treated everyone really good. He's a good person. I love him with my whole heart. And he taught me so much, and he was able to provide this access mm-hmm. that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I value that experience, and I will always love my uncle. And, he's of elevated age now, and it's really interesting to see him get older, you know what I mean? But he is always really cool. Like, he used to have a motorcycle, and he used to ride me around on his motorcycle. He was really into athletics, and so I would go to all these different sports events with him and my aunt. And so I'm not, so having that interaction was really good for me. And what it did is it gave me the ability, and it's funny because it's almost like a sense of self-worth and esteem and privilege mm-hmm. that I feel like I deserve. And so and I move through life like that, and I always have. And mm-hmm. I think some people would say, you're not being humble, or that's not how dinner is supposed to be. And I'm just like, no, I deserve respect. I deserve to be treated well. When I go into a restaurant or a place of business, I want to be served. Why? Because those people are being paid to provide that experience. And so I do move through life like that. I'm not the kind of person that's very impressed with titles. I don't cater to other people I don't grovel, I guess, to certain people like some people do. And I think sometimes that can be off-putting to certain individuals, but to me, I'm just like, like we're all the same. We're all people. And guess what? Like, you want respect, so do I. I deserve that, so do you. So it's very like, a different way of viewing the world and moving through the world. And I think it's shocking to some people. Like my husband is very shocked by the way I do things sometimes, like when we travel and when we, and I do demand respect. I do expect to be treated well, and if not, I will call it out, and I will, and so I don't want to be a Karen, but you know what I mean? I never want to be that kind of person, but I do think that, I think that's where I learned it from. Because I sure as heck didn't learn it from my parents or from other people. I think I learned it from him. And I actually am very grateful for that because it's opened a lot of doors for me. Mm-hmm. And it's given me the self-esteem and the ability to speak up for myself and have a voice. And that has been very helpful in my educational journey. So for that, I'm thankful. And I do really, I value the parts of me that come from my Spanish side. And it's weird, and I mentioned this before, but I really want a housekeeper. And it's so crazy because, so back in the day, I know for a fact that, people in our family, they would have, hired help. It's crazy. And I'm just is that where it comes from? Is it that Spanish side that... Because me, I'm just that's what I'm working towards so I can have help around the house. And my dad gets so mad at me when I say that out loud. And I'll probably piss people off online too. But my dad's you should be doing that on their own. You should be able to do this, clean up after yourself. You should never have someone do that for you. That's really bad. I didn't raise you up to be like that. He gets after me. And I'm just I know, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I think it's from my Spanish side. I'm sorry. Or maybe I'm being really prejudiced right now.
Or it's just the modern day where I have enough money to have someone just do this for me. Because
mm-hmm.
there's definitely that thing where oh, you have the same hours in the day as
mm-hmm.
Beyonce. I'm yeah, but she can also hire a nanny. Mm-hmm. She can hire someone to cook for her. She can hire
mm-hmm.
someone to do the dishes, someone to clean the house.
Yep.
She hires people to do things for her, so
yeah.
multiple things are getting done in a day.
Yeah, and it's just it's outsourcing so you can focus on what you need to focus on mm-hmm. individually and have help with other things. Like deep cleaning, that's what I want someone to be around for. It's deep clean the baseboards and the floors and scrub the walls and all that good stuff.
I'm sure you can find someone to do that, hire them once a month, twice a month.
Before the pandemic, I did.
Don't be embarrassed.
I'm embarrassed,
I would
but
love
yeah,
to
I did.
hire someone to clean the house for me. I'm lazy AF. I don't care.
And honestly, I used to do that when I was younger. When I was in high school, senior year, I used to, I would charge some of the teachers and the doctors in Tuba City, mm-hmm. and I would clean their houses and clean their cars for $50, $75.
Yeah.
And it was cool, and that's how I made money. And now I'm at a point where I can afford to hire help, and so I do. But this is before the pandemic. I haven't brought anyone in since. So, but I probably will again.
Do it.
Because I love it. It's awesome.
All right, so that's the end of our episode.
Shall we do shout-outs real quick?
Oh, yeah, quick
Holidays
shout-out.
in November.
Yeah, so we did this last night with
mm-hmm.
the Native veterans. Thank you all for your service for November 11th. And mm-hmm. then happy birthday to all the Marines out there. We know how much you love celebrating your second birthday.
Mm-hmm.
There's no sarcasm in that. I know my voice just went down. I'm sorry. People, I've been told, I don't know if you're being sarcastic or if you are genuine. I'm genuine. Happy birthday to the Marines. Mm-hmm. And then Native American Heritage Day.
Yay.
Tell us, I don't know.
November 25th.
November 25th, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's heritage. I'm always what does that mean?
All right,
I know, you look up definitions, but
yeah.
Heritage, is it DNA? Is it ancestry? Is it knickknacks you saved from your grandma? What is heritage to you guys? What does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, post down below. Let us know what heritage means to you and how you celebrate. That'd be cool.
If you celebrate, or
yeah.
if you're just Native all day, every day.
Yep. So for my shout-outs for Native American Heritage Day, I want to shout out to all the 400, I think it's actually 400,100 Dene across the United States. Awesome. Hope you guys have a great day. Shout out to all the Native veterans and the Navajo Dene Marines. Thank you for choosing to sacrifice your own freedom to protect our homeland. I appreciate it. Pray for you guys every day. And I hope you guys are going to have a great month and continue to, sense that support from your family and friends and colleagues and I guess brothers and sisters in arms. And shout out to my brother, my kid's father, and my cousin Matt and my cousin Ray, who are all veterans. So I don't know if any of them have ever watched Navajo Tea Time, but if you do, I love you guys and thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll name mine.
Okay.
Like my uncle Darren, my older brother Charles, his wife Sam, my cousin Junior. He watches this. He was like actually one of the first one to watch our first episode, the one where we did outside. He's like, they're so cool. They set up a whole thing outside and had like a little tea party and talked about stuff.
Yeah,
so shout out to you, James. Happy birthday. My aunts Cheryl and Birdie, and then my grandpa Alvin.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
That's why I said like Marines from my family.
Okay, so y'all, let me name off a few other people. No, my kid's dad is a Marine, and his dad was a Marine also, but he's passed on. But he does have brothers who are in the Marine Corps, so shout out to Larison, to Lance, and then their sister's in the Army. Her name is Larissa. So love you guys. I hope you're doing well. And yeah, that's like, we don't have a huge military family, but yeah, there are a lot of, and we do have friends, of
friends
course.
And family members, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's other family members in different branches. Shout out to you guys too. Not good with names.
I know, you guys are awesome. I like Kelsey was saying last night, I could never join the military. She was saying that, and for various reasons, and I feel the same way too. Yeah, like I said, I was very deliberate with my choices, and I did choose not to join the military. However, I almost enlisted in the Navy at one point, and at the time, my husband was like, he's like, you would do so bad in the military because you can't be told what to do by anyone. And I was just like, how dare you say that to me? I can do it. And he was all like, no, it's not that you're not tough enough. It's just like, you don't take orders from anybody. And I'm like, you're right. He's like, you would have a miserable time.
I question everything. Like, even if I agree with the thing, I'm like, but why? But why? Can we go deeper? And, like,
oh my gosh, she'd be so built from all the push-ups she's doing from talking back.
And I don't run.
Yeah.
So, they're like,
yeah.
Run, cadet, whatever.
Yeah.
You're gonna, blah, blah, are you gonna die? I guess I'll die.
I like all physical discomfort to be voluntary. I don't like it to be forced upon me. So, like, the boot camp stories I heard from, like, my brother and my ex were just, to me, they were horrendous. And so I have so much respect for them and their ability to survive, the Crucible, to survive Warrior Week, all those things that they did. It's just, it's amazing. And so, yeah, shout out to all of you guys who chose to serve. And I know everyone has different reasons for doing so, but I'm very grateful.
Same here, yeah. I remember one time I had a dream where my older brother, he was still in boot camp, but I had a dream that I was at boot camp with him and he was yelling at, like, the drill sergeant was yelling at my brother, so I punched the drill sergeant. And I'm like, yep, I can't join the Marines, I can't join the military. And it's like, if that's like a dream I'm having, it's like, nope, I guess I won't do it.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right, bye guys.
All right.